G'day everyone, how you going? Welcome to another global update here um, with me, Stephen Petith at the Global Wealth Club. All right, so let's get into it. November 2027, year's nearly done. God, where's it gone? Um, Excellent. All right, so we'll start off with some global trends. Um, this is interesting. This is a really interesting state of affairs that's happening in Mexico. We're seeing a lot of stuff happen um, in sorry, guys, in in the Americas, especially in Central America and South America, where there's a change of guard happening, especially around places like Argentina and so forth. But Mexico is in total chaos. It is really in a world of hurt. Um, Mexico City and a couple of the other major cities have had a lot of protests, especially from Gen Z. Um, and a lot of it comes back because the president basically backed the cartels. And the people have just had enough of the cartels running, especially northern Mexico. So they there was just mass protests for about a week, and they're sort of settled down now. But now the farmers are blocking the roads to the US. There's a lot of trucks and farmers that are blocking roads on goods that are going across the border, basically taking up the same fight against the cartels and against the the president and the people, and the police and the military have started to turn on the people. And in some places, it's close to a civil war. There is people who are fighting back against the cartels in areas to take their city or town back. And it's good to see, but two, it can be a bit of a nightmare for the country as a whole. But we're seeing this all over the world. We saw this sort of stuff happen in Greece. We saw some stuff happen in Italy. We've seen it in Hungary and Poland and places all over where there is protests against the UK, for instance. We're in France, where there's protests against the government for being not for the people. And the more this happens, the more unsteady the world's going to get, and the more that the world is going to slowly break apart, especially the Western world. Um, you expect a lot of this in developing nations like Mexico and Myanmar in Asia and so forth as they grow up. Um, but you don't expect it every day in developed nations. We'll see a lot of this in Europe over the next 4 to 5 years, possibly breaking a lot of breakouts into to very robust fighting. So watch what's happening and have a look what's happening, but don't take the media on face value. You got to go dig a bit sideways on some of this stuff because they're just saying that the people are ungrateful and all this sort of stuff, but it's actually starting to show that the people are really had enough of the political state. Does that mean it's going to change? No. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, and that we're going to see a lot more civil unrest like it is happening in Mexico. Um, on that path, the Ukraine-Russia peace deal that's been put together over the last week, um, this is still a prelude to war. Um, the the US drafted a 28-point plan, put it to both Ukraine and Russia. Russia agreed to it, but they had terms that they wanted changing. Ukraine agreed to it, but it's got their terms. It's now down as of what I could read today. It's down to a 19-point plan, and it pretty much the points that have been um, talked about the most are the ones around NATO's involvement, the caps on Ukrainian army size, forward mobility on NATO weapons, whether Ukraine can join NATO, and so forth. The um, land seizures, or the land, the Donbass and Luhansk regions, they've pretty much been ceded by the look of it, to Russia, and it was what the people wanted. If you go back to the original Minsk agreement, which was put in place between Russia, Europe, and Ukraine, purely and simply so Russia could delay for war. Um, but the Minsk agreement outlined that those two regions would have independence votes. Um, and Zelensky and his mates basically just went, no, we're just going to use this and milk it. The the amount of money that is missing from uh, donations and equipment that has been donated to Ukraine is tens, hundreds of billions, and it's pretty much gone to the top guys in the Ukrainian parliament, military, and the oligarchy. Everyone, complains about the Russian oligarchy. Ukraine has a worse oligarchy um, in it, and there's pretty much only a very select few people that make any money in Ukraine. Um, the people no longer want the war. Pretty much the brain drain out of the Ukraine is um, is complete. There's pretty much no one left. There's only just cannon fodder left for people. So we'll see where this goes. I expect that this will go through. The peace plan will go through. There will be peace. The Ukraine's boundaries will be redrawn. Russia will get its territory, but then Europe will start to do false flag events against Russia. It will increase the false flag events. We saw one in Poland just recently, and because Europe needs war more than anyone else on the planet, and it's pretty much the only thing that will delay the inevitable mass breakup in Europe. So continue to watch this space. It's a rolling. Um, uh, what am I trying to say? It's a rolling um, path to war, right? So things haven't happened here, but they've happened there, and so forth. And eventually, I think once Trump leaves office, Europe will get what it wants, and what it wants is not what the rest of the world needs. So, peace for the short term, war outlook still for the long term. Um, I didn't change that heading properly, but this again comes to um, the war is coming, and this is metal shortage. Um, so the London Metals Exchange, late October, early November, pretty much run out of metal. There was uh, refineries and traders all over the world flying metals, literally flying metal. And when I say metals, I'm talking predominantly silver here, but gold and platinum as well was part of this. Was being flown into the London Metals Exchange and the commodities exchange that deals with um, uh, precious metals, as they didn't have enough. The run on the exchange was huge. We're talking tons and tons and tons of metals, and the shortage led to a massive spike with people that lease their metals, especially silver, into the exchange by up to 89%. That is just a phenomenal short-term increase in what you can get for your metals. And for those that don't know, that if you hold, say you're a major investor and you hold metal, and you hold metals at the exchange, or through the bullion market, um, you can, if you're a long-term holder, say you're going to be holding the metals forever, in instance, you can put your portfolio of metals up that and lease it back to the metals exchange so that they can settle contracts, and they pay you an interest rate for it, 3, 4, 5% normally, but at the moment it's been up to like 15, 20% on short-term lease rates, and anything in between. It's been swinging wildly. And a lot of these contracts are countries swapping out of notes. So they're swapping out of treasury debt, and they're swapping back into metals. They're also taking delivery of the metals. So that's why there was a physical shortage. And families and all that are doing the same things, because metals become very much in demand when people have lost trust in the government and they firmly believe that war and sanctions are coming. So if you're a country like Russia, China, Iran, or pretty much the majority BRICS nations, where Europe is going to want to sanction you at every step of the way, or put SWIFT controls on you and that sort of stuff, um, it basically um, shortcuts that process, because if you're holding the physical metal in your vaults in your country, right, the your enemies or those that want to harm you in the financial world can't do it, because you're no longer part of that world. So this is things, when you see things like this, and it's short term, it happened for 4 or 5 uh, days, but it's not the first time this has happened this year, right? So this was end of October. It happened also earlier in the year, March, April, as well. And the other side of this was the exchange was also going through a bit of an upgrade, and that the CEO just totally lost control of what was going on and didn't have enough um, control over physical metals. So you were going to see a lot of this. This won't be the first. This won't be the last. I reached out to a metals guy of mine that I'm very good friends with in Singapore. We were having a good chat with him about this stuff, because they were part of the leasing program, and he said they were making for metals leasing, they were making basically a fortune over the time that they were leasing metal back into the exchanges and the mints, and it's going to continue. So these are all signs that there's distrust in the market, that governments aren't trusting each other, people aren't trusting the government, and that tends to lead to war. So these are all those money moves that happen pre a major event. So before any major event, doesn't matter whether it's um, a default in a currency, a war, whatever major shock happens, the financial markets always predict uh, the future, because people move their money before they'll do anything else. So, for instance, if you're say you're a king and you're going to go and invade the country next door, what are you first going to do? You're going to bring as much money back home, or move trade contracts or whatever out of that enemy so you don't get harmed. And then there's other people around you that know the inside knowledge. So they start to move their money, and they tell friends and family to move their money and move their assets. So money, the flow of money, and when you know how to spot the flow of money and spot the bits and pieces like this, the metal shortage here, and you mix it together with different bits and pieces of information, you can start to predict the wave that's coming for a major event like a war. Following on from last week's thing, War on Farmers here in Australia, we now have War on Farmers UK edition. And this has been going now for quite a while. And once again, the government is so out of touch with farmers. And I really don't think a lot of these guys are, I don't know, for supposedly intelligent people, they are severely dumb when it comes to the underpinning of what makes their societies work. And at the core of anything, even if you go back to feudal England times, um, you had a lord with his manor and his peerage and his land holdings. The only thing that made the whole thing work was the tenant farmers that operated the land, right? So, we've been that way for millennia, and we still are because people still have to eat, and everything has to function around basically a food driven part of the economy, and it's a very large part of the economy. Without food, we starve. So um, what's happened over the last 24 hours in the UK? So it was budget day in the UK Wednesday, UK time. Um, the police were arresting farmers for protesting. They On the night before the protest, they cancelled the um, ability or the permission for the protest to happen, but the farmers denied it anyway and went forward. And meanwhile, at the same time in the UK, we've got asylum seekers running riot in Northern England. You've got um, police running around arresting people for DEI and hurty words. Um, and now you got police arresting farmers and confiscating their tractors and equipment um, purely and simply because they've had a gutful and want to stand up for themselves. Uh, Police need to pull their head in. Here in Australia, in the UK, and in other places of the world, because when the time comes, um, the police are going to be targeted. They are going to be on the chopping block um, because they're no longer for the people. And since we've started calling our police um, units police forces, they're no longer working for the people. And we saw that during COVID. They weren't working for the people at all. And uh, it's about time that they strongly had a good look at themselves and realize that they need to be part of the community. They're not there to protect the the politicians. They're there to protect the people. And these are the things that need to start happening because, man, if the UK loses all its farmers and Australia loses its farmers, the UK's lost 12,000 farms um, over the last 2 years, I think it is, or 18 months. Australia's lost a similar equivalent. Now, we're talking small farm holds right through the very large farm holds. In the UK, a farm is pretty much only 30 or 40 acres, not very big at all. In Australia, that's not even the front paddock for a lot of farms. But farming in the UK is small. It's just small landholders, um, and that's how it works. But they also are what underpins most regional towns in the UK, because the farms that are in the regional towns support the schools, support the pubs, support the mechanics, the shopping centres, the high streets, and so forth. And if you destroy one part of industry, you destroy the rest of it. And so we've got to, and this comes back to we don't have a politician problem, we have a voter problem, and the voters are doing this to themselves. If you vote for a major party at the moment, you're the fucking idiot that is causing these problems to the country, not the politicians, because we know what politicians are going to do. They're going to be idiots, right? But the voters, as voters, we need to change our way, and we need to do it very quick. And or otherwise, we're going to see, you know, a civil war break out in places like the UK, and it's going to get very nasty very quickly. I This was sent to me, and then I started doing a um bit of a look into the data behind it. And so this was done by uh, the Moonshots, what's it called? The Finn Institute. It's their Moonshot program. I think it's Peter Donatus, who's behind it. And basically, they surveyed the world and they surveyed a lot of people around the world. And then they took what were the um, uh, five major categories affecting your life, basically. So if you have a look there, pretty much in the developed world, um, is the number one thing on everyone's mind was cost of living, right? And then you go through and it's poverty and inequality. But when they're talking about, like in Asia, poverty and social inequalities, they're talking proper inequality, right? They're not talking about this made up bullshit that we have in the West. Right. Social protection, unemployment is a big one in a lot of places, because as economies start to fail, unemployment starts to go up, right? And but the one thing out of all that chart, if you quickly have a look at it, the biggest thing missing is climate change. Nothing in that chart, in this data, in this polling, that was put out to thing, and you start to see it in local polls here in Australia, and you're seeing it in polls from all over the world, is climate change doesn't rate on anyone's scale. And there's polling from Europe where climate change is not even in the top 10. But when you have a look at the priorities of politicians don't line up at all with the priorities of the people. So this goes back to the same thing. We have a voter problem because we keep voting in politicians that are so out of touch with what's really happening in the country and what's really happening in society, that they're picking bullshit topics that they think are super um, uh, important, and they're not. Climate change, which this government in Australia and most governments around the world at the moment keep wanting to push on people, is not what the people want. Right. That's why we're seeing big swings in places like the US when they dropped out of COP30 and didn't even attend. But then we have dickhead Bowen and that who will keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it because that's their underlying Fabian roots are keep pushing this one idea about destroying, and the easiest way to destroy is with something that doesn't exist. Right. And basically no one cares about what the politicians care about. So we've got to wake up, but I don't know how we wake up people who are in the free generation, who have more to claim from um, uh, from the government than the government does from them. So it's an interesting data, and that's been proven time and time again. So coming to Australia, um, public service now is out of control. It's just ridiculous. 2.6 million public servants, a 232 billion wages bill for a country of 26 million people, right? So 26 million people, 2.6 million public servants, that's 1% of our population. That's just ridiculous. 143 public servants per 1,000 people. Right. That is just ridiculous. China, as you can see there, the stat, I found the stat, and that was the highest stat that I can find. It was um, uh, less than that. In some of the others, it was around the 12, 13, right the way to 23. So I thought, no, I'll try and find the highest I could, and it was 23 public servants per 1,000 people in China. And everyone says that China's a communist country and all that sort of stuff. Man, if you now do not see that we are 100% out of control with what is happening in our governments, and once again, that the only people that can stop it are the voting public, um, you're never going to change. And we'll never change the system. We might as well just close the door and lock the light, turn the lights off, lock the door, and leave, because it'll get to the point where it'll be so out of control that it nearly won't be able to be turned around. And that's a super scary thought, that we won't be able to turn this thing around, and we won't be able to turn this monstrous government and blowout that we're creating. Um, so we've got to we've got to change, and I just don't know how people change when they're so ideologically brainwashed into things that don't matter. Um, so, uh, but it's going to get worse, and um, it's going to get worse quicker than what I ever thought. Um, COP30. So leading on from that is with things that don't matter. You saw the polling that I showed you before. No one in the populations care about climate change except the political class and the people that are making money off it. At COP30, which didn't include any of the major five emitters that were at the conference, um, Bowen basically was the only OECD nation that backed what's the Blem Declaration. And the Blem Declaration, when you read it, basically says by 2050 or before, that all fossil fuels will be phased out, and the mining of them and the mining or extraction of them in the country that signed up will be stopped. So um, Bowen was pushing this. It's the reason that he wanted um, uh, the COP in Australia, is so that he could have this on his agenda. He's now been made the COP president for COP 21. So he'll basically be running around the world this year, trying to get people to sign up to this. He is so wedded to it, it's not funny. Out of all the nations that were there, there was 24 nations that signed. Um, and the ones that signed were the ones that basically um, uh, don't have a lot of fossil fuels in their own nation, um, and rely on other people to fund most of their basically economies. And um, the Pacific Islands are a prime example. They were major people that signed up to this because we fund their economies, right? The Western world funds the Pacific Islands, so they don't care. They're just looking for the biggest handout. Uh, if this actually goes from a declaration into a binding sort of agreement, which is what Bowen wants, and it's what the people that were behind it want, it will end all Australian industry. gone, no more. And that includes farming because we cannot survive and we cannot do industrial farming on the scale that we are doing in this country and have the agricultural impact without chemical fertilizers. Rightly or wrongly, um, it is just something we can't do. And there is alternates out there, but they cannot be made in the quantities um, uh, that um, that would be needed to farm the scale that Australia does. So Australia is one of the only countries that farms how like broad acre farming, whether it be beef or sheep or cattle or wheat, grains and so forth. There's not many countries on the planet that farm like us. Canada's up there, but then again, it's cyclic. The US has some, but we are one of the largest broadacre farming nations in the world, and we do produce a lot, but we could be producing 10 times more if it wasn't for our stupid rules and regulations. Now, if they stop all fossil fuels and the extraction of fossil fuels, one, you're going to find that the BRICS nations are just going to jump on this and just go drill, baby, drill. And basically, you cost of fuel going into your car will be $100 a litre. And that's the type of thing where it'll get to. Uh, the other side of things is okay, direct mining in this country is about 4% of GDP, but the indirect service industry is about 30% of GDP. And out of that service industry, about 40% of it supports agriculture and mining and all the other bits around it. Plus then we then on top of that we have a very large services based export industry. So without the extractive industries, we would lose a very large chunk of that as well because it's all revolves around mining services, engineering, design and engineering services, financial services for mines. Pretty much the ASX would become a wasteland for mining because the miners would go elsewhere. Uh, so this would just devastate Australia. And I don't think, actually, I know that the likes of Bowen and all his cronies in Parliament and all the ones on the Liberals that want to do the same thing, the moderates, the Teals, none of them have the ability to put all the dots together to work out that this is so destructive to Australia and so nation ending that is just fucking unbelievable and catastrophic for a country such as ours. So once again, the people need to turn around, and we've got to turn around quick, and just stop this madness, or otherwise there will be no country to support. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with some political stuff that's going on, and then I've got a little video I want to show you. And it's a really cool video, but it's a political type thing, but it sort of gives you a bit of an insight into um, just how things work. So carrying on, the Libs have been at war now ever since the election. It's only going to get worse. The moderates are white-anting the major uh, Liberal branches at New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, um, pretty much all over the country. The move to Kelly Sloan and Jess Wilson was about the moderates re-establishing themselves to make sure that they can force a different agenda to the leadership. There's a big group in Victoria that hate the idea of dumping net zero, and the same in New South Wales. Uh, the um, the party is so torn over this one issue that they can't see that it doesn't mean anything to the people that are backing them, and that's why they're losing. Um, they're losing support at such a great rate because they're not talking. They're talking about something that the people that support them don't care about. Really, I've been saying this for a long time that no one really cares about net zero. It doesn't really exist, right? And the the political moderates, which are the left-leaning part of the coalition and especially the Libs, have got themselves so entangled with it that they believe it's the only way out. And they will keep going down that route further and further and further until there is no Liberal Party left, or pretty much no National Party, because half of them are going down the same road. We saw today at just before question time in Parliament, I think it was, Barnaby got up and resigned from the Nationals. He won't be the last. We will see more and more people, politicians resign. Um, Supposedly he's going to One Nation, but we'll watch this space. I'm not sure that he would give up a lower house seat for a Senate seat, but if he ran as an independent in his New England seat, I think he would still grab it. He has a very large following in that seat, and the numbers would suggest that he would probably hold that seat. So we're we're I would say we're at the tipping point now before the coalition finally wipes itself out, and then we can start rebuilding the conservative side of politics in this country. This is another reason that shows you why the Liberal Party are gone. The favourability ratings of the three major standouts being Andrew Hastie, Angus Taylor, and Susan Ley are woeful. Um, Andrew Hastie has a +1, which means that basically no one knows who he is. Um, Angus Taylor at -6 means that people sort of know who he is, but hate him, but very much don't know who he is. And Susan Ley is just hated. If you have a look there, that uh, people that um, are unsure about her and all that sort of stuff, and don't think that she's highly likable or favourable is huge. So um, you cannot win government with people, and this is quite deep for people that don't like. And then if you have a look at the which one the leadership would you like, unsure at 45% out of all Australians polled, and it's increasing, and 26%. So unsure has a higher vote in a poll than the leader or anyone else, right? That could be there. And if you put unsure with someone else, that's over 55% or over 50% of everyone polled wanted someone else or was unsure who should be leader. That is woeful. The party is dead. It has no one that the Australian people want to see leader. So that basically means no one wants the party anymore. They're moving on. They're looking for alternatives. Their message, and even by people like Jacinta Price, who I'm like, and Angus Taylor, I don't mind either, they have no message at all that the people want while they're in that party. Andrew Hastie, I think the best thing that he could do is sit on the backbench and stay there. He is a strong performer, but he is not wanted. Um, the only people that sort of want him are the moderates of the Liberal Party because they think that by the time he loses the next election, they'll be able to roll him and say, I told you so, we should have gone further and further left. So this is seriously bad for the Libs. I don't know if they can come back from this. Now, when you look at the overall voting intention of people out there, it pretty much hasn't changed too much. Um, the Greens and other have flipped around a bit. It's still 58-42-ish, two-party preferred. Labor's still on top. Lib Nat's 24, which is unwinnable. The Liberal National Party cannot win under 24%. One Nation at 15%. I've seen it high as 18, 19%. One Nation, their vote isn't 15%. I'll tell you that now. It is not 15%. And this is why Barnaby Joyce would be very wise on where he goes or how he connects himself, because he could trip himself up here and do everyone a disjustice of going into the wrong place. Because out of that Fon vote and out of the Greens vote, you got to look at the Greens vote. There is probably picking up some of the ALP vote, and it's definitely picking up some LNP vote. But the Fon vote is probably only really about 8%, maybe 9%, because the other percentage points are people going, I don't know where else to go, but I know of Fon, I know of One Nation, so I'm just going to say I'm going to vote for them. And when it comes to the actual day to vote, they won't. So um, the the Fon vote is very much inflated because people just have nowhere they to land at this point in time. If the vote held, and this is projected lower house seats, we would see the LNP lose 10, the ALP pick up 3. That's just ridiculous. Greens, Centre Alliance, Katter stay the same, but Fon picks up 4 seats and Independents pick up 4 seats. The Independents are predominantly teal, and the Independents are predominantly picking up what would be teal seats. So the Teals would go from 4-5 to about 8-9 in Parliament. That makes them a very strong party, and I think you'll find when they actually uh, get another couple of seats in Parliament or can sway another couple of people to come across, they will literally form a party, because you to be recognised as a party, you need 6 members of Parliament, right? And that can be uh, say 4 in the lower house, 2 in the upper house, or whatever. But the official thing is to be recognised as a party in Parliament by the government. It's typically 6 seats, and that's where you get the extra funding and all the rest of it. One Nation, with their 4 senators, has been recognised as a party in Parliament by the government, but that's a wedge tactic by uh, that's a wedge tactic by the ALP against the LNP. But they didn't get the full resources that you get if you're a recognised party. Like, you don't get a party room, and they didn't get all that sort of stuff. But they've sort of recognised them as a bit of a party. So because they've got 4 in the Senate. But this just shows you that the Australian political landscape at the moment is over and up for the taking. and a serious conservative force can emerge. It's not going to be fully emerged by the next election, but it will. Out of all this ashes and carnage and all that sort of stuff, something will form. And let's hope something forms sooner rather than later. Myself, I'm looking at people like Jared Rennick's People First Party rather than One Nation, because their policies are more sensible. Their libertarians are too far um, out there with their government, free for all. We need someone who's more centrist and more business friendly, and that seems to be Jared's party. But once again, he needs to attract um, sitting members, whether at a state level, council level, or in the federal parliament, to accelerate the growth of that party. So, so watch this space. Okay. Oops, here we go. Now, this is the video I wanted to show you. It's quite long. Um, uh, um, it was quite long, and so what I'll do is I'll put it on. Um, now it's 18 minutes, but what I might do is I might speed it up a little bit. Oh shit, what happened? Sorry, guys. I've hit the wrong button.
Do you want to rule? Do you see the problems in your country and know how to fix them? If only you
Done it again. Doesn't want to work for me.
Do you want to rule? Do you see the problems in your country and know how to fix them? If only you had the power to do so. Well, you come to the right place. But before we begin this lesson in political power, ask yourself, why don't rulers see as clearly as you, instead acting in such selfish, self-destructive, short-sighted ways? Are they stupid, these most powerful people in the world, or is it something else? The throne looks omnipotent from afar, but it is not as it seems. Take the throne to act, and the throne acts upon you. Accept that, or turn back now before we discuss the rules for rulers. No matter how bright the rays of any sun king, no man rules alone. A king can't build roads alone, can't enforce laws alone, can't defend the nation or himself alone. The power of a king is not to act, but to get others to act on his behalf, using the treasure in his vaults. A king needs an army and someone to run it, treasure and someone to collect it, law and someone to enforce it. The individuals needed to make the necessary things happen are the king's keys to power. All the changes you wish to make are but thoughts in your head if the keys will not follow your commands. In a dictatorship where might makes right, the number of keys to power is small, perhaps only a dozen generals, bureaucrats, and regional leaders. Sway them to your side, and the power to rule is yours, but never forget, displease them, and they will replace you. Now, all countries lie on a spectrum, from those where the ruler needs few key supporters to those where the ruler needs many. This foundation of power is why countries are different. Get many keys or few, the rules are the same. First, get the key supporters on your side. With them, you have the power to act. You have everything. Without them, you have nothing. Now, in order to keep those keys to power, you must, second, control the treasure. You must make sure your treasure is raised and distributed to you for all your hard work and to the keys needed to keep your position. This is your true work as a ruler, figuring out how best to raise and distribute resources so as not to topple the house of cards upon which your throne sits. Now, you, aspiring benevolent dictator, may want to help your citizens, but your control of the treasure is what attracts rivals. So you must keep those keys loyal. But there's only so much treasure in your vaults, so much wealth your kingdom produces. So beware. Every bit of treasure spent on citizens is treasure not spent on loyalty. Thus, doing the right thing, spending the wealth of the nation on the citizens of the nation, hands a tool of power acquisition to your rivals. Treasure poured into roads and universities and hospitals is treasure a rival can promise to key supporters if only they switch sides. Benevolent dictators can spend their take on the citizens, but the keys must get their rewards. For even if you have gathered the most loyal, angelic supporters, they have the same problem as you, just one level down. Being a key to power is a position of power. They too must watch out for rivals from below or above. Thus, the treasure they get must also be spent to maintain their position. The loyal and dim may stay by your side no matter what, but smart key supporters will always watch the balance of power, ready to change allegiance if you look to be the loser in a shifting web of alliances. In countries where the keys are few, the rewards are great, and when violence rules, the most ruthless are attracted, and angels that build good works will lose to devils that don't. So buy all the loyalty you can, because loyalty in dictatorial organizations of all kinds is everything. For the ruler, anyway. Thus, the dictatorship exposed. A king who needs his court to raise the treasure to keep the court loyal and keep raising the treasure. This is the self-sustaining core of power. All outside is secondary. Now, a king with many key supporters has real problems. Not just their expense, but also their competing needs and rivalries are difficult to balance. The more complicated the social and financial web between them all, the more able a rival is to sway a critical mass. The more key supporters a ruler has on average, the shorter their reign. Which brings us to the third rule for rulers: minimize key supporters. If a key in your court becomes unnecessary, his skills no longer required, you must kick him out. After a successful coup, the new dictator will purge some of those who helped him come to power while working with the underlings of the previous dictator, which from the outside seems a terrible idea. Why abandon your fellow revolutionaries? Are the old dictator's supporters not a danger? But the keys necessary to gain power are not the same as those needed to keep it. Having someone on the payroll who was vital in the past but useless now is the same as spending money on the citizens. Treasure wasted on the irrelevant. And by definition, a dictator that pulls off a coup has promised greater treasure to those switching sides. The size of the vault has not changed, so the treasure must be split among fewer. A dictator that sways the right keys, takes control of the treasure, cuts unnecessary spending, kills unnecessary keys, will have a long and successful career. Seeing the structure unveiled, you might be excited to get started and control a country to the benefit of you and your cronies, or you might be exhausted, wishing to do good but seeing the structural difficulties. Now turn to democracy for salvation. So let us discuss rulers as representatives. You again might have grand dreams of the utopia you wish to build, but no man rules alone, and never more so than in democracy. Presidents and prime ministers must negotiate with their senates and parliaments and vice versa, and they all have their own key supporters to manage. In a well-designed democracy, power is fractured among many and is taken not with force, but with words, meaning you must get thousands or millions of citizens to, if not like you on election day, at least like you better than the alternative. With so many voters and such fractured power, it's impossible to, as a dictator would, follow these rules and buy loyalty. Or is it? Of course not. Don't think of citizens as individuals with their individual desires, but instead as divided into blocks: the elderly or homeowners or business owners or the poor. Blocks you can reward as a group. Democracies have wildly complicated tax codes and laws, not as accident, but as reward for the blocks that get and keep the ruling representatives in power. Farming subsidies, for example, have nothing to do with the food a nation needs, but entirely with how key the vote of the farming bloc is. Countries where farmers' votes don't swing elections don't have farming subsidies. If a bloc doesn't vote, such as younger citizens, then no need to divert rewards their way. Even if large in number, they are irrelevant to gaining power, which is good news for you. One less block to sway, and the treasure you give your key blocks has to come from somewhere. If you want long years in office, Rule 3 is your friend in a democracy just as much as a dictatorship. You can't eliminate those who don't vote for you, but there is still much you can do. Once in power, make it easier for your key blocks to vote and harder for others. Establish voting systems that reduce the number of blocks you need to win, the more rivals you get. Very handy indeed. Draw election borders to predetermine the results for you or your cronies, and have party pre-elections with Byzantine rules to determine who blocks even can vote for. Mix and match the above for even better power perpetuation. When approval ratings couldn't be lower, yet re-election rates couldn't be higher, you'll know you've succeeded. Now, enough with thinking about the citizens. Even in a democracy, there still are very influential individual key supporters you need on your side, because their money or influence or favors keeps you in power. While you can't just promise to give them treasure directly, as a dictator would, you can create loopholes for their investments, pass laws that they've written, or print get out of jail free cards for their actions. Not a wheelbarrow of gold to the door, but contracts for their business. You as a ruler do have roads to build, or computers to maintain, or buildings to reconstruct. No man rules alone, after all. Or you could take the moral path and ignore the big keys, but you'll fight against those who didn't. Good luck with that. Corruption is not some kind of petty crime, but rather a tool of power in democracies and dictatorships. But more on that another time. So accept the favors, sway the key blocks, and you will get into power, ruling with actions that look contradictory and stupid to those who don't understand the game, privately helping a powerful industry you publicly denounced, or passing laws that hurt a bloc that voted for you. But your job isn't to have a consistent, understandable ruling policy, but to balance the interests of your keys to power, big and small. That is how you stay in office. Now, with all this headache of being a representative, you may wonder, looking at Rule 3, why couldn't you skip all this block building, favor trading nonsense and just bribe the army to take power? We must finally turn to taxes and revolts. You must understand Rule 2 and how the treasure is raised and used to hold the country together. If we graph the tax rate of countries versus the number of key supporters the ruler needs, there's a clear relationship. More democracy, lower taxes. If you're sitting comfortably in a cushy democracy, you may scoff at this, but your fellow citizens who don't earn enough don't pay income taxes and get rebates, bringing the average tax rate down. In dictatorships, this doesn't happen. Dictatorships often forego tax paperwork in favor of just taking wealth directly. It's common for the dictator to force farmers to sell their produce to him for little, then turn around and sell it on the open market, pocketing the difference at an unthinkably high equivalent tax rate. So taxes in democracies are low in comparison to dictatorships. But why do representatives lower their take? Well, cutting taxes is a crowd pleaser. Dictators have no need to please the crowds, and thus can take a large percentage from their poor citizens to pay key supporters. But representatives in a democracy can take a smaller percentage from each to pay their key supporters, because their educated, freer citizens are more productive than peasants. For rulers in a democracy, the more productivity, the better, which is why they build universities and hospitals and roads and grant freedoms, not just out of the goodness of their hearts, but because it increases citizen productiveness, which increases treasure for the ruler and their key supporters, even when a lower percentage is taken. Democracies are better places to live than dictatorships, not because representatives are better people, but because their needs happen to be aligned with a large portion of the population. The things that make citizens more productive also make their lives better. Representatives want everyone productive so everyone gets highways. The worst dictators are those whose incentives are aligned with the fewest citizens, those who have the fewest keys to power. This explains why the worst dictatorships have something in common: gold or oil or diamonds or similar. If the wealth of a nation is mostly dug out of the ground, it's a terrible place to live because a gold mine can run with dying slaves and still produce great treasure. Oil is harder, but luckily foreign companies can extract and refine it without any citizen involvement. With citizens outside this cycle, they can be ignored while the ruler is rewarded and the keys to power kept loyal. Thus, we live in a world where the best, smartest democracies are stable, the worst, richest dictatorships are stable, and in between is a valley of revolution. The resource-rich dictators build roads only from their ports to their resources and from their palace to the airport, and the people stay quiet not because this is fine or even because they're scared, but because the cold truth is starving, disconnected illiterates don't make good revolutionaries. Now, a middling dictator without resources must, as mentioned before, take a large amount of wealth directly from his poor farmers and factory workers. Thus, two roads won't do, and so he must maintain some minimums of life for the citizens. But keeping the workforce somewhat connected and somewhat educated and somewhat healthy makes them more able to revolt. Now understand, the romantic image of the people storming the gates and overthrowing their dictator is mostly a fantasy. If you run a middling dictatorship, the people only storm the palace when the army lets them to remove you because you lost control over your keys and are being replaced. This is why, after popular revolts in middling dictatorships, the new ruler is often the same as the old, if not worse. The people didn't replace the king, the court replaced the king, using the people's protest they let happen to do it. The very things a benevolent dictator wants to build to cross this valley take treasure away from the keys to power and make the citizens more able to revolt, often ending in a stronger ruler, less likely to build bridges and more loyal to his keys. On the other side, the best democracies are stable, not just because the large number of keys and their competing desires makes dictatorial revolt near impossible to organize, but also because the revolt would destroy the very wealth it intended to capture, the high productivity of the citizens. Plus, those helping the would-be dictator in a democracy know he plans to cull key supporters once in power. That's what a coup is. So potential key supporters must weigh the probability of surviving the cull and getting the rewards versus the risk of being on the outside of a dictatorship they helped create. In a stable democracy, that's a terrible gamble. Maybe you'll be incredibly wealthy, but probably you'll be dead and have made the lives of everyone you know worse. The math says no. Being on the right side of a coup in a dictatorship means having the resources to get you and your family what the peasants lack: healthcare, education, quality of life. This is what makes the competition for power so fierce. But in a democracy, most already have these things, so why risk it? So the more the wealth of a nation comes from the productive citizens of the nation, the more the power gets spread out, and the more the ruler must maintain the quality of life for those citizens. The less. Now, if a stable democracy becomes very poor, or if a resource that dwarfs the productivity of the citizens is found, the odds of this gamble change and make it more possible for a small group to seize power. Because if the current quality of life is terrible, or the wealth not dependent on the citizens, coups are worth the risk. When democracies fall, these are usually the reasons. These rules for rulers explain not only why some men are monsters and others are merciful, but everything about politics, from war to foreign aid to political dynasties to corruption, all of which we can talk about at another time. But for now, you, aspiring ruler, may be disgusted by the world of politics and have decided to avoid it entirely. But you cannot, for rulers come in many forms. Yes, kings, presidents, and prime ministers, but also deans, dons, mayors, chairs, chiefs. These rules apply to all and explain their actions, from the CEO of the largest global corporate conglomerate who must keep his board happy to the chair of the smallest homeowners association, managing votes and spending membership fees. You cannot escape structures of power. You can only turn a blind eye to understanding them. And if you ever want the change you dream about, there's a zeroth rule you cannot ignore. Without power, you can affect nothing. You may not like these rules, but surely better you on the throne than someone else. And who knows? Maybe you'll be different.
Cool. So I found that quite a very interesting video when it was sent to me, and it to me it just outlined how the system works, and you can also see where we're regressing towards the dictatorial side of things by certain people in our economies being rewarded over others. So there you go, guys. That's today's uh, global update and an update from me. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for watching that video. I hope you got a lot out of it. And yeah, happy to take a couple of questions if anyone's got any. Thanks, really learning. Thanks. No, no, nothing. Okay. Um, so anyway, I'll see you next week and or next fortnight and for another update. Thank you guys. Appreciate you.